Hello there. I can't believe it. We have zoomed through this semester. No pun intended with using the word Zoom, but guess what? Like today is the last lecture of the class. This is the last day that I will give you new information that you need to learn for the semester that you'll be tested on. You'll finish up today's lecture and then put it all into practice with finishing up your final project. And you have an exam on Tuesday, April 6th. I will send you an email reminder, but your exam will be just like exam 1 and 2. It will be on Blackboard with Respondus Lockdown Browser required, and it will cover all of the information listed on the website, ginasimpson.online, for content on exam 3. It will cover all of the information about marketing and all of the information about financials. And today we're going to finish up with our last lecture about financials. So let's get started. I know that we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about money, and money is a performance measure. It should not be the motivator for why you open your business. Most of the time, entrepreneurs open businesses for other reasons, such as they want to be their own boss, they want to set their own schedule, or they just really have a passion for solving a particular problem and want to open a business because of that. Money, although it's nice to have, is a performance measure that tells us how well we are or are not doing within our business. And the way that we look at money to determine how well we're doing is by reading the story that is produced with our financial statements. Now, in our last two classes, we have talked a lot about that story. In the first class, we talked about all of the houses in the story that we're going to tell, and we talked about all the characters that live in those houses. In the next class, we talked about, well, what does that mean for reading the story? And we figured out that when we make pro forma financial statements for the first 12 months, that what we're effectively doing is making an outline of how we want our story to read. After we open our business, then we have actual financial statements that we can read, and that's the actual story. But those financial statements mean nothing if we don't have something to compare them to. So, first month we're open, we can take our actual P&L, compare it to our pro forma P&L, and determine how we were doing. Um, and so we have figured out how to write the story. After the story actually starts, how to read it, and how to adjust the story to make sure that the story is going the way that we want it to. Today, we're going to talk about, well, different places to go get money in order to start our business and to grow our business, and what happens within a timeline as our business grows, and to understand the different types of money we'll need and the different places to go look for it. So today, bear with me because I'm going to share a lot of screens today. And and you know that usually means everything bounces around on my monitor. So bear with me here. I'm going to share screen and we're going to get back to the digital whiteboard. And let's talk for a bit about money and the story. Now, remember, we talked about making the outline for our story. What do we want our story to look like? And as we estimate our startup costs, here we have begun writing our story. So we have estimated startup costs. Then we come over, this is opening day, remember, and after opening day, then we're going to make, and you're going to do this in your final project, 12 months of a pro forma financial statement or P&L, same thing. So we're going to have January, February, one for March, on, and then we can have a 12-month total. And in that 12-month total, it just means we added the sales for January, the sales for February, the sales for March, and this is a total of all 12 months added together. So as we do this, we learned that it's pretty easy to estimate our fixed costs that are down here. We know also that it's easy to determine what one cost of goods sold would be. So we're going to determine those. The harder part was to determine sales and to think about that. But as we do our pro forma financial, let's think about it in these terms. We know that sales are going to start out really low. So let's just make up some numbers. Let's say it started out at $5 the first month. February, we moved and we had $10. March, we had $15 in sales, 20, so forth. Well, with that being the case, let's just estimate that our fixed costs are going to be $1,500 per month. We know that's 1,500, 1,500, 1,500. And what this tells us is that in the beginning, when we open our business, that there will not be enough in net sales to cover our fixed costs. So we'll be operating at a loss. And this is going to happen for the first several months of the business. It's important to understand these numbers, and let's move over and let's think about cash flow as well. I'm not requiring you to do this in the final project, but one other thing that you would need to do, if in fact you were about to open your own business, is to also construct pro forma cash flow statements. And you would do it for the same time periods that you chose for your P&L. You would make one for January, for February, March, and so forth. Now remember, we're operating on an accrual basis. So sales show up on the P&L. Let's pretend we sold it and we invoiced our customer and they had 30 days to pay. So hopefully that money is not, that cash is not going to come in January. That cash would show up in February, hopefully. So this is our cash in. We had a +0 here, a +5 here, hopefully. Maybe here we have a +10 and we see a slight delay in it, which we expect. However, fixed costs still have to be paid. So what we're seeing here is with cash out, even in the month of January, we're going to have a minus $1,500. So we're already operating at a cash deficit of $1,500. Now here we had $5. That's great. We've got to take out another $1,500. So when we do that, now we're at $1,495, but we still had that cash deficit. So in essence, we would add these two together, and right now we're at a cash deficit of $2,900.95. And this just keeps going throughout the year. So it's important to understand this concept. Remember that I told you last class that the money that we would use to pay these fixed costs is called working capital. Working capital is the second place bucket of money that we're going to need. So over here, we've estimated startup costs. We'll list them out. I'm sorry that I backtracked just a second. And we got total startup costs. This is going to be the first bucket of money that we have to secure. We've got to have money to go through everything to actually start our business. The second bucket of money that we're going to have to secure is in working capital. And as you can see, because we continually pay fixed costs and because it takes time for sales to ramp up, and in fact, it takes even longer for enough cash to build up to cover all of our fixed expenses, then we're going to need enough working capital to cover us for quite some time. So this is going to be a pretty sizable bucket of money. Here, and when we come back to this income statement, we can see, that it's going to take us a little while for sales to ramp up till we make it to that magic place that is called break even. And that is where we have enough sales to cover all of our expenses such that the bottom line is 0. Now we've got to hit this point and pass through it so that we can begin to make a profit, so that the bottom line is positive. It's important here when we are constructing our pro forma income statements that we do as good a job as possible at estimating how quickly sales are going to grow, what in fact our cost of goods sold are, and in fact what our fixed expenses are, because we have to be able to estimate when we're going to hit break even and begin to have a positive number in that bottom line. And the reason that it's important for us to understand that is because we need to know, if we go look for working capital, how much we truly need. And we're going to have enough to cover fixed costs up to this point till we hit profit. In addition to needing that amount of money, we also have to think about this cash flow statement. Now, remember, I told you cash flow is delayed, that the cash coming in is delayed. However, it always seems like cash going out is never delayed. It seems like it's always right on time. And because cash coming in is delayed, and because it takes time for sales to ramp up, this means that the negative cash deficit that we build up over time can get very sizable. So if we think about in January, we had 0 cash in and we had cash out. I'm sorry, make that. So here we had 0 cash in. We had the same size cash out. This means we were operating at a small cash deficit. Here we had a little bitty cash in, same size cash out. This means our cash deficit got a little bigger. Our cash in gets a little bit bigger that month. Our cash out, if we're smart, remaining constant. Bottom line, still, even though we're bringing in a little bit more cash, we're not bringing in enough to make up the deficit. So we just see the deficit get larger and larger as time goes. Now, the delay in actually becoming profitable and catching up on our cash deficit, so we've got a cash deficit, the delay in profit to making up this cash deficit till we actually get to the point of being cash flow positive can be quite some time. And because of this, we need to be sure that we have estimated really well when we feel like we'll hit cash flow positive, because again, we've got to have enough money to cover till we get profitable, plus the time it takes to make up the cash deficit. And this is the amount of working capital that we need to have in our second bucket to ensure that we can stay in business while we're waiting for sales and cash flow to come flowing in. And I hope that that makes sense. This is all really important for you to understand, because when we go and start looking for money, the places where we get seed money, this is where we call it, you've heard seed money, startup costs here. The places where we get seed money and the places where we get working capital are very different. Regardless of where you go to get money, though, you're going to need to know exactly how much you need and exactly how what you need it for. So going through your financials here is an imperative, and doing a good job at estimating your pro formas is an imperative in order to effectively go out and raise cash or to get any type of financing to sustain your company until your company can sustain itself. Now, when we talk about the type of financing that we can get, there are 2 types of financing. We can get debt financing. This is where we get a loan. We can get loans from banks, loans from people, loans from credit unions, but debt typically is a loan against an asset, normally. And all debt has to be paid back, normally in the form of monthly payments. So you have to pay back all debt. This is one type of financing. The second type of financing that you could possibly get is called equity financing. Now, equity financing means that someone is giving you money in exchange for ownership. We do not pay back equity money. If someone gives us that, we don't pay it back. Instead, the investor gets paid in dividends. Dividends happen when, over here on the P&L, when we finally get here to a profit, and we have enough profit to sustain the business, and then also have enough profit to pay out dividends. And when we say sustain the business, this means we've got to hit cash flow positive before we can pay out good dividends as a small company. Know that that is where people who invest and get an equity stake in the company know it's going to take that long before they start to see any return on the investment that they made into your company. This is why every time you're watching Shark Tank or you see any type of pitch competition, that you're going to hear them ask, when do you expect to break even? And when do you expect to be cash flow positive? Because the answer to those questions is going to tell the investor when they can expect to start to see a return. Now, they want to know when they're going to make a return. They want a good estimate of like what their return might look like in comparison to the amount of money that they invested. But they also want to know that you've done a really good job of your homework and your due diligence in constructing your financial statements. And they want to hear that you know what you're talking about. So these are some really, really important things for you to internalize as we think about constructing pro formas for our startups. Now, moving along just a little bit, here we've talked about the first bucket of money that we might have to raise. And we've also talked about the second bucket of money that we might have to raise. Now, with those two things in mind, it's easy to see, going back to several classes back, why we would advocate having a lean startup. The leaner your company when you start, the less risk is involved. And so this helps. You can see how having a huge bucket of money for startup costs and a huge bucket of money for working capital can be really, really difficult to obtain. So lean startup helps to alleviate the pain going along with that and helps to minimize risk. Okay, other places where we might need money. A third place where we may need money is when we start to hit a growth phase, growth and expansion. Now, we're going to talk about this a bit more when I pull up some slides, but growth and expansion can be like we opened a delivery company. And in the beginning, we got a loan to buy one truck. But because we've grown and our deliveries have picked up, now we need to have 2 trucks. So there's a time when we need to grow and expand our business. Perhaps we have expanded to the point inside this business that we've saturated the market. Now, remember from the Market Opportunity Navigator, as we evaluated our opportunities, some were pursue now, and there were some that were like, hey, let's put that on the shelf. Perhaps we've made it to the point that we're ready to pull one of those off the shelf and we're ready to expand our business to take in yet another product offering or target market. Or perhaps expansion means we're ready to open multiple locations of our business. Whatever it means, this is yet another bucket of money that we might need. So I hope that this is all making sense to you and helps you see that you need to be very careful in constructing pro formas. You need to be very careful in estimating your startup cost. And we need to think about effectively, when might we hit break even? When might we hit cash flow positive? And what is our cash deficit going to look like until we get to cash flow positive so that we can be sure to have enough working capital on hand to sustain our business? Now, in all of this, we can see how even though sales are growing exponentially, and I mean, if we look at this, like this is 100% growth. This is like 50% growth, another 50% growth. These are huge growth numbers in the world of business, but they're still not enough to sustain fixed expenses. So while sales may be growing, if that's the only thing we look at and the only thing we think about, we still, if we don't have enough cash on hand for working capital, even though sales are growing, we can still have to close our doors because we can't pay our bills. So I hope that all makes sense. If not, email me. I'll be happy to try to explain some of this to you. But what I want to do now is take this a bit further. Let me stop sharing, and I'm going to want to share another screen with you, and I'm going to pull up some PowerPoint slides. So give me just a minute to get that set up, please. And I want to talk to you about the different places that we could possibly go get money, and I want to talk to you about a business life cycle. Now, before we jump into that, I want to remind you of the life cycle that we learned about in biology class way back in high school. And we know that all organisms follow a life cycle. We're born, we have rapid growth, and then we level out for a while. Then we begin to decline and we die off. So businesses and industries follow a very similar life cycle. Businesses open, they start up, they experience exponential growth in sales, as I just showed you, from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20. That's considered exponential growth if you map it as a percentage. Exponential growth, capture a large majority of the target market, so growth starts to level off. Then some things start to happen, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Some things start to happen, and then we start to see companies decline and possibly die off, or maybe it's time to sell the company. Then we have to make some changes. So businesses do follow this life cycle. Industries follow the same type of life cycle. So to help you distinguish between a business and an industry, a business is a single entity within an overarching industry. As you do some of the research in Bruno on looking up your industry for where your business is going to live, you're going to need to understand what industry your entity lives in. So with Velocity, with the bicycle shop, my business entity lived within the bicycle industry, even larger than that within the sporting goods industry, within retail sporting goods industry. So that kind of helps you understand that. Restaurants, we could think about Starbucks. Starbucks is, even though they have a lot of them, is a business entity within the retail coffee industry, and could even be considered within the retail restaurant industry because they serve food. We have fast food industries, we have casual dining industries, we have fine dining industries. All of those go in the restaurant industry, but we can be specific about which industry we're in. So I hope that helps you distinguish between a business and an industry, but help you to understand that industries also follow the same type of life cycle. So let's look at this for just a minute. Let me share screen with you here and get you to a PowerPoint slide. All right, so here you have these slides on GinaSimpson.online for you. Here we see that, let me get here so I can flip through my slides. We're going to start looking now at sources of money to help us open our business and sustain our business until it can sustain itself. And as you read in chapters 12 and 13, there are several sources of money. First one, and the most popular one, is self-financing. The number one. So if you want to open a business someday, start saving money now. The second place that we go is friends and family. From there, as we mentioned, there's two types of financing. We could get debt financing, where we could get a loan for an asset. And then there's also equity financing, where we will get an investor who will infuse money into our business in exchange for equity in the company. These are known as angel investors, also could be known as venture capitalists. We'll talk about those. And then finally, crowdfunding is yet another popular way that we can get money. That's like Kickstarter, GoFundMe's, those types of things. The type of financing that you seek is going to be very dependent on where you are in the business life cycle. So let's look at that life cycle. Here you can see a normal curve, um, business life cycle. Now here on the left, we see growth. Let's think about that axis, the growth axis, as opening day. Remember, we had startup costs, then we drew a line, and that line was opening day. So starting at opening day, we have some startup costs that we incur. We're going to need money here, and this is where we start to experience exponential growth in sales. Now, exponential growth means growth by percentage, not in volume. Okay. So from $5 to $10 in sales month over month is a 100% increase in sales. So remember, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about a gross profit margin here. And we see exponential sales, exponential growth in sales during this first period. So here we go through our startup costs and then we make it to growth. The business is going to grow, sales are going to be growing exponentially, and then we're going to hit here. And at this point, we're going to start to see this curve start to flatten out right here. And although we're still growing, sales are not growing as quickly as they were in the beginning. Now, this is happening because we are beginning to hit a market saturation. We've captured almost as many customers as we could expect to capture with our business. Hopefully we have repeat customers who are coming in, but in the beginning here, we're just capturing whole lots of new customers. Here it starts to level out because the number of new customers that we can capture is starting to level out. So sales are going to level out. Now at this point, we can make a really big decision. And I'm going to come back to that in just a minute, but I want to talk to you about, well, what happens as we get here and we start to decline? Now, what's going to happen here is if we just continue up the curve, we're eventually going to get to complete saturation in our business. We're not going to be able to capture more sales, and we're going to see our sales start to level out completely. Once this happens, then we hope that we have planned for it. So let's talk about planning for this point in our business. Really smart business owners understand that businesses follow a life cycle. And really smart business owners are able to watch what's happening, read their story in sales over time to start to see when sales start to slow down and when sales start to level out. When you see that, you understand now that you've made it to the top here of the business life cycle. Now, this happens for lots of reasons. Like I said, we've captured as many customers as we're going to capture. Maybe the market has changed. Maybe customers are finding different solutions to the problem that they're having. Maybe another company has opened up that has something way more novel and interesting than you. So while we're keeping some customers, the new customers that possibly we could have gotten have started to go to a new store. This could happen because, like I said, we've just captured all of them. Lots of things happen in the market, but smart business owners look for this and expect it. Now, if you look for this and expect it, then you can plan for it. And what do I mean by plan for it? Now, the pro forma financial statements that you are making are to help you estimate what your first year or so in the business is going to look like. However, this is a practice that you're going to need to keep doing as you operate your business. So, and after the business opens, we tend to call it budgeting. So pro forma financials, budgeting, all follow the same process. You've been open for a few years now, and you've gone through your first 3 years pro forma financial statements. Well, at this point, it's time to make new ones. Remember, we always need something to compare our actual story to be sure our story's staying on track. So we're going to budget out for the next 3 years and or in effect, make pro forma financials for the next 3 years too. This is a practice you should really, really begin now and don't let it lapse. Companies that let it lapse haven't prepared for this and don't see it coming and don't expect it. When you do your pro formas, if you're smart and you understand the way that a business life cycle works, then you know that as you make pro formas here in this time frame of the business life cycle, then year over year, you can say, well, hey, a great way to budget is like sales are growing at an average of 30%. So next year, let's budget 30% growth in each one of our line items. Great way to do it. As sales start to slow down, you recognize that and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Next year, we cannot make the assumption that the sales trajectory is going to stay the same. In fact, we've already seen signs of slowdown. So next year, rather than budget out at a 30% growth for each line item, next year, we may need to back that down to 15%, and let's see how it starts to play out. And then we also know here it's going to slow down even more and level out even more, such that perhaps the next year we even back it down to 10% growth. We finally get to a point where we're like, hey, I think we're really level. We need to keep things status quo. The companies that don't understand that this happens are the companies that are continually adding 10% growth to each line item every year, no matter what. And in all honesty, I will tell you, the thing that drives me crazy about government and the way that they budget is they do this. And it's not just a Republican government or a Democratic government. For the most part, it's every government, from our local city government to our county government to our state government to our national government. They like to come in and every year start at zero-based budgeting, as they call it, and then they will tack on a 10% increase in every line item every year. And what this assumes is that there's going to be a 10% growth in revenue every year. However, we know, because businesses and industries follow life cycles, that that's just not the case. It doesn't work that way. But because our governments, all of them, budget this way, then hence what happens is they don't have enough working capital to sustain their operations, and we are in debt. Now, the government can just print more money and keep themselves operating. It's a dangerous game they're playing, because eventually they're not going to be able to print more money. And I don't know what's going to happen. But I can tell you, you can't operate a business that way. The people who operate a business that way, when they make it to this point in the business life cycle, however, they're still trying to operate their business the same way. Let me try to get my pen there. However, they're still trying to operate their business this way. We'll get to the point that where they have so much deficit in trying to operate that they will close their doors. So businesses that haven't planned and budgeted correctly will close. And this is known as shakeout. Shakeout. So this helps you understand, plan, expect it. If you don't plan and expect it, you'll probably close. And you're going to be a victim of shakeout. For the companies who do plan for this, you know that yet this might be another place where you have to have a bucket of money so that you can sustain the maturity level until you can decide what's the best way for me to move to keep my business alive. We'll start to see a decline in businesses, and for those who didn't plan, they'll get into crisis mode, understand, oh, I don't have enough money to do this, and then eventually death, and those businesses close. So let's move it back over here to this point here where I told you, or we can make a decision. Now here, when we start to recognize by reading our story that sales numbers are not growing as quickly. Actually, we still have growth, but not the same level of growth. Once we see that, then we need to start making some plans. making some plans and figuring out what is going on. You could go back to your Market Opportunity Navigator, and you could pull another product offering off the shelf and introduce it here and start yourself another life cycle with that product. Perhaps you want to completely change up your business to prepare. Do plan for it. The thing you have to do here is understand that markets change. You need to keep your business canvas in front of you at all times. Have it put up on a board in your office. And although we're doing it right now to see if this is a good opportunity to open our business, that business canvas is also going to serve as a visual to keep you on track. And you should look at it every day as you're managing your company to say, is this value proposition still valid in the market? Do my customers still need this problem solved? And do they still value the solution I have over everything else in the market? And if they don't, it's time, to make an adjustment. Make an adjustment. So if you plan for this, then what you're going to see is you may have a small little dip, but then you're going to continue to thrive as a business. One of the examples I like to use in class of people, some people are just stubborn and they think that they're not going to have to change, that their solution is great and they don't like change and they don't want change. However, they're stubborn to their own detriment. I joke about my mom, and this is the example I like to use. Like, she is just adamant that she does not want to use the cell phone for all the things that it can be used for. And she's really proud of herself for that. She's just stubborn. And it took me forever to help her understand that she could use this phone to FaceTime with her grandchildren when we couldn't be together, or that she could use this device to text with my preteen daughter because that is the market's preferred form of, communication with them, so that she could meet the kids where they are rather than expecting them to come to her. But she was being stubborn. So she's being stubborn, which tells me, yep, she's right here in her life cycle. And as sad as it is, yes, it's time for the decline and there'll eventually be the death. But don't be that stubborn person inside your business and refuse to see what the market is telling you that it really wants. Because if you are that stubborn person, then you're going to see your business decline and die. So I hope this helps you understand kind of the way that businesses follow a life cycle. Let's move on and let's talk more about money and what this means. So here, these are going to be the stages that we're going to talk about in the business life cycle. Seed and development, we'll talk about that in a moment. Startup, growth and expansion, growth and establishment, expansion, and then maturity and possible exit. Here we are back in the business life cycle that we just posted for you. And we see here that these are the stages in the business life cycle. Here is our startup phase, where we possibly need some startup money to help us with covering working capital. Here in growth and establishment is when sales grow exponentially and we indeed need some financing, a bucket of money to come in to help us sustain paying our fixed expenses with working capital. But because we're getting established here, we might also need to get some debt financing to obtain some more assets. Expansion happens here. We're going to decide, remember, we've made it to that magic point where we need to make a decision. Maybe we want to expand our business. Perhaps this is by bringing in another product offering. Perhaps this is by changing our product offering, or maybe it is we need to open multiple locations. We've saturated the target market in our current location, but if we had another location in another city, then we could expand and in fact keep growing. So we may need money for expansion. And then finally here we get to maturity. We've reached the shakeout point. And possible exit, we need to understand what's happening here and make some decisions. But where's the seed and development stage? Remember, I told you in startup costs, that's going to be our seed and development stage. Let's look for that. The seed and development stage happens here. Remember, this axis is our opening day. So seed and development happens before actual startup. This is all of the due diligence that you're doing in class right now falls into this stage. And also, all of the money that you would have to spend on startup costs will fall into the seed and development stage. This all happens before startup, before opening day. So to put all of this into one graphic for you, you can see here is the seed and development stage, all the due diligence that you are doing right now. Here's startup. We've opened the doors and we're trying to get new customers. We're spending money on marketing, lots of money on marketing, and trying to get new customers. We're getting established. Sales have started growing, and we're really making a really good headway into the market and in establishing customer base and growing our sales. We have maxed out here. Sales have started to slow down, and now we're becoming a mature business. And in order to sustain, we need to make some changes. We need to look at expanding something. Perhaps we need to expand our products or our locations. And then from here, we look at the maturity and possible exit. Now, remember I told you the first bucket of money that we're going to need is going to be for startup costs. This is here in the seed and development. Now, this is the hardest money to come by. In the seed and development stage and the startup stage here, it's really, really hard to find money. Because here at this point, you don't have a proven track record of success. So you have an estimated story, you've made your outline, but you don't have the actual story yet. So you can't prove to investors or banks that you're going to be successful or that you're going to have the money to even pay them back. You haven't established enough sales to prove yourself. So because of that, going out and trying to find money is extremely difficult. Here is where we get back into the different sources of money that we saw on the first slide. And the number one source of financing within the seed and development stage is self-financing, using your own money. Now you can get creative and perhaps you can use equity that you have in your home. Maybe you've got a really good savings account. Maybe you want to cash out some of your retirement if you really believe in your endeavor, but you're going to have to self-finance in the beginning. The second place that you might go to ask for money in either of these two is through friends and family. Because you don't have a proven track record of a successful business, you need to go to people who know you, who believe in you, and who trust you. And they're going to give you the money, but it's got to be people you know really well. So first place here, self-finance. Second is friends and family. Now, as we get into the startup phase, it's possible at this point that we may be able to go to a bank or a different type of financing institution and get a loan, but the chances of that are pretty low. Although you may have an asset, such as a truck for a delivery business, you don't have a proven track record of revenue coming in to prove that you can make the payment on that truck. And financial institutions do not like to repossess items. So it's possible you could get a loan, but not super likely. So this is one of the reasons it makes starting a business extremely difficult, extremely. You have to plan ahead and be able to have money on hand from somewhere in order to get yourself started and to sustain yourself until you make it here to the growth stage. Now, at the growth stage, what we're starting to see here is an established story of success. You can show your financial statements and prove that you have grown sales, prove you have revenue. You can prove that you're going to be successful, that you could go out and get a loan, debt, and that you could pay people back. So it becomes easier. Now, this is the point where possibly we would see angels enter into um, the business to be equity investors for you. Now, an equity investor, remember, is someone who will invest money into your business in exchange for part ownership. Now, while it's possible to get an angel to come in right here in the startup phase, it's not likely. It's not likely. But here in the growth and establishment phase, it is much more likely. In fact, this is where angel investors tend to enter into investments. And so this is why it's really important for you to know where you are in the business life cycle. So you know, am I at a point that I could approach angel investors? So let's talk for just a second about the difference between angel investors and venture capitalists. Both are investors that will invest money into your business in exchange for ownership. Both are equity investors, but they do it in a bit of a different way. Angel investors tend to invest less money earlier in the business life cycle. Less money because it's more risky. The closer we are to here, the more risky it is to enter into an investment, because although we think that you're going to be successful, we still have quite a bit of room to grow before it's truly proven. So angel investors will come in, will invest a smaller amount of money, and will incur more risk associated with their investment. Angel investors also typically do not want any um, input into the management of the company. I've done some angel investing over the last 10 years or so. And the way that it works is for angel investors, it's more of a numbers game. Because it is a high risk investment, we play the numbers. So, for example, if you have $100,000, then I'm going to split that $100,000 up and invest $10,000 in 10 different companies and hope that one of them hits. Because if one of them hits, then it makes up for all of the other investments that I lost. So it's absolutely a numbers game. The other thing, and I don't want any input into the management of the company. The other thing about angel investors is they have to be willing to wait longer to get a return on their investment. As you can see, if an angel investor comes in at this point, anywhere here in the business life cycle, we know that it's going to be more here before you guys hit a point to where you actually are stable enough to start paying dividends. So angel investors have a much longer time period before they will see a return on their investment. Venture capitalists, on the other hand, invest more money. They come in much later in the business life cycle, and they want to see much more success and a much more established story before they will enter. They're going to enter in a later stage in the business life cycle, and they're going to invest much more money than an angel investor. They're going to want equity in the company, but they're also going to want to have a say in the management of the company, meaning they want to have input in the decisions that revolve around managing and growing this company. So you have to be really careful when you bring in equity investors and understand what role they want to play as part owner. Maybe you're okay with bringing in venture capitalists who are going to have some say in the management of your business. Maybe not. So just know that about yourself. Go all the way back to the beginning of the semester. That's self-awareness, and understand how it would work for you. Now, venture capitalists are going to bring in more money. They're going to want to have more say in the management of the company, and they're going to expect a payout much sooner. In fact, most venture capitalists will enter into an agreement with a company or invest in a company with their eyes on an IPO or a sale, because they're going to want to ensure that they get a return on their investment, and they want the return on their investment as quickly as possible. And going public is a great way to get a return on their investment quickly, and it is typically a sizable return on their investment. So now that we understand a little bit of the difference between angel investors and venture capitalists, then we can see how it makes sense that they enter into opportunities to invest in companies at different points in the life cycle. Now, you as an entrepreneur, if you're needing a cash infusion, understand angel investors know that the majority of the money that they invest in companies is used to sustain working capital. We know that. You need the money to help you grow and to stay alive while you grow. Venture capitalists usually like to come in more and look at expansion. So you've got a proven track record of success, but now we're going to do some more awesome things to expand. And so they're going to come in and give you money to bring in a different product offering, to open multiple locations, or to bring in more money to infuse in you, to grow you, to prepare you to go public. As an entrepreneur, you need to know where you are in the life cycle. You need to know exactly what you need money for, because that's going to determine who you ask for money. And you need to know exactly how much you need. You need to know exactly how much you need to sustain you, to grow your company until you can get to a point that you can actually start to pay out a return to either angel investors or venture capitalists. So in understanding these first 4 stages in the business life cycle, I hope that this emphasizes to you how important it is to do a really good job with your pro forma financial statements and with budgeting. If someone comes to me and is wanting to pitch me to invest into their company, I'm going to watch to see how well that they have constructed their numbers, how well do they write their story, how well has their story played out, and if it hasn't played out, and it doesn't always, and that's okay, what I'm more interested in is what corrections did you make to get back to what you estimated, because that tells me that you have the wherewithal to write your story, to read your story, and correct your story if the story isn't going well. Now, and if I can tell you're at this point in the life cycle, then I'm much more likely to invest in you. So I hope that this all makes perfect sense for you and helps you understand you need to know how much money you need, what you need it for, and where you are in the business life cycle to determine who you will go ask for money, and also so that you can tell them at what point you would be able to give them a return if it's equity financing. Here, one other thing that I want to talk to you about is the IPO, the IPO, going public, liquidate, or sell. Once you get to this point in the business life cycle and we start to see shakeout occur, if you have planned for it and you decided to write it down up to here, and you're like, yes, I decided to do this, then you've really, at some point from here to here, you've got to make some decisions. Decisions to either expand your company and keep growing it so that you could possibly go public, or have many more locations. You've got to make some decisions. Or do you want to just like, I'm done, let's just liquidate, let's just close the company? Or do you want to prepare your company to be sold? So at this point, immaturity and possible exit occurs here in the business life cycle. Now, I hope that all of this is making a lot of sense to you. This is a lot of info to cover, all the way from constructing the outline for your story, understanding the houses that exist in the story, understanding the characters in each one of the houses. So we make that outline of our story until we actually open. And then after we open, then our true story starts to play out. We compare our true story to the outline to see how we're doing. If it's not going the way we want, we need to course correct. So we've talked a whole lot about all of that. And today we've talked about how important it is to be able to write an effective story, and as your story plays out, to be able to read that story and correct it, and to understand where you are here in the business life cycle. Because there are times within your company in this life cycle that you're going to need different types of buckets of money. You need to know how much you need, and you need to know who is the appropriate person to go to at that time to ask for the money. Here in the beginning, startup, a long shot to get an angel investor or a loan, self-finance friends and family here in the early days of your company. Long shot to get debt or an angel investor, but possible. But here we're still leaning more on the friends and family. After we've established and we've started growing, it's much easier then to bring in some angel investors or to go get a loan from a bank because you have a proven track record. Even further along, as we start to get to the point where growth start to level out, we make some decisions to expand or to grow the company or prepare it to get ready for an IPO. This is where venture capitalist money would come in. And then finally here, we can decide what we want to do with our business. Do we want to expand, go public, expand, start a new life cycle and keep growing? Or do we want to possibly liquidate and or sell our business? The key in all of this is to be the smart person who's prepared for this point to happen in your business. Be prepared. Expect it. And if you follow all of this, you're going to be much more prepared than a majority of the entrepreneurs out there. Much more prepared than most governments. Did I say that? Oh, I recorded that. But it's true. Now we've covered a ton of info here. Let me get back. I'm ready to stop sharing screen. Remember that this slideshow is available to you on the website. This one is the slideshow of sources of money, places to go get it. And this covers all of the information that we are going to talk about in this class. We have started from you as an entrepreneur becoming completely self-aware, building teams, moving all the way through the process until now we're working out numbers, filling in that business canvas. We've constructed out what we think our story might look like, and we know where we're going to go get money at certain points in the business life cycle, and we know how to decide how much we're going to need and who to go ask. I mean, we've come a really long way. Once we figure all this out, then we can sit down, put it all into the business canvas, and we can determine, hey, is this a good opportunity or not? Do we want to open this business or not? On Tuesday, you're going to have an exam that covers all of the aspects associated with marketing and all the aspects associated with the financials. It's going to be on Blackboard as all of your exams have been. If you have any questions, let me know. But I hope that you have a really, really enjoyable time studying this and preparing for the test. And I hope that you are working towards your final project. I will do a separate video because this one has turned out to be quite long to give you some further instructions about the final part of your business project, your final project for class. As always, if you have any questions, please email me. Please let me know. And I look forward to seeing how well you all do on the exam. Bye.